Hello and welcome to the next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So, Graham, you keep joking with me that I've been replaced by artificial intelligence. And it's not the real version of me that's turning up on this podcast anymore. But
Well, sadly, it is, Kevin. It is you. You are the real person. We all opted for the AI version, but you keep coming back
I know I
on.
keep coming back. I keep being annoying. But, Graham, I thought it'd be a great idea today. All of this hype around AI seems to be all people are talking about these days.
Mm.
A couple of folk like us who are probably at the more senior end of the working population.
Mm-hmm.
How are we actually using AI? How is it changing all of those things that we've done for years and years and years?
Well, we're very much definitely in the sort of half or so of entrepreneurs and business owners who are using AI. And there's various studies that suggesting that around a half, maybe 56% of entrepreneurs, business owners are actually using it in their workflows. And I certainly am. And one of the things that I'm sort of excited by potentially how it might help micro businesses grow. Because, at the end of the day, if I'm going to take one of the things that has happened to me in the last few months, I came across something called Benson, which is BNSN, and it's created by John Benson, and it's effectively a trained copywriting AI. So, in other words, the one thing you can't do is prompt yourself to great copy, right? You just try it and see. And the methodologies that ChatGPT uses to create things like headlines, things like copy, etc., just cannot create the kind of copy that really sells, really
I think
good.
taking a step back behind that, Graham, getting ChatGPT to create something in any sort of writing style
Mm.
that either you want to emulate or feels like your own writing style is incredibly difficult.
To that point, my business is one part of my business is actually writing things on behalf of clients, and however much I, would back my own skills, I am at best a sort of a mid-tier at best copywriter.
Yeah.
The difference that I'm making now is I can emulate an A-lister type copywriter.
Okay.
The reason for that is I'm using trained models that John Benson, who is famed for producing the first video sales letter, the type of thing that you have like PowerPoint slides and they've got a few words on each, that type of thing. Very, very sophisticated pieces of sales collateral. That, I mean, there's lots to it. There's NLP and all kinds of stuff based in these VSLs. But he's got a huge amount of copywriting experience and he's brought other people in. So, for instance, a very latest thing that we've got within the actual product, which is still a minimum viable product set, was to do with YouTube videos. And so it was giving headlines for YouTube videos. And the actual service that I'm buying effectively has a top YouTube agency, one of the biggest in the world, who've helped train the model that we're using to create headlines for YouTube videos. And I shared some of that for my son's latest business or new business, and they were just staggering. But the way in which Benson works is that it's based on what he calls pre-prompting, or it's a sort of, what you do is you create a blueprint, and the blueprint is a series of questions that it sort of generates, and you cover things like who you are, who your avatar or your target audience is, and what your offer is. Broadly speaking, those things, and it sort of splits it out, and it looks at all kinds of aspects of that. So that's kind of your blueprint, and it's quite sophisticated.
So
And
you've
it's
fed
got,
a lot of information that's going to quite a bit of detail about who the audience is, what their
well,
point is.
yeah, but it's not, you don't think that you have to be there all day. You could literally scrape it off a website, and as long as you have 300 words, it'll do the job.
Yeah.
So basically, it's got to have, up to 300 words. They've tried to test it with 1,000 words, etc., but there's no gain. So basically, 300 words. And so what you do is you scrape a lot of information from all kinds of different sources. You put it into something like ChatGPT, and then that's where it can work well. You then basically collapse that to 300 words or thereabouts. Put that into Benson. That then creates the blueprint. Then you can go into the various models, which might be copywriting for a video sales letter, a VSL, copywriting for an email, for a YouTube video, all kinds of different applications of where copy comes in. And so, but when you actually see the copy that's written, you think, wow, that's really quite good, but I wonder if I can make it better. And so what they've got are things like refiners. And a refiner might be, you've seen some copy and you think that's quite good, but I don't know quite if it's corporate enough. So what you do is you press kill the hype. So, corporate accounts don't really want to have hypey language, salesy language. Some people do because it kind of gets to the emotion, and that's what drives people towards wanting to know more or become curious or whatever. So you kill the hype, and all of a sudden you're reading the sort of copy that perhaps some of your big corporate finance people would approve of. And so it has that capability. But you can also write it as what they call in America fifth graders, which I think fifth graders is like you're going to secondary school, the first year of secondary school. So effectively that kind of level of writing ability. Now, that average is quite, easy. Yeah, if you'll be writing it in a fairly easy way, it can do that. But the way in which it writes is the kind of copy that you see that really works because it's trained on models from people who've made millions from various campaigns. So that's in my workflow. Benson is now part of what I'm doing to help my clients. And of course, it's not just like press a button. You still got a fair bit of
Yeah.
manipulation to do, but I have a
To
workflow.
pick that a little bit, that
Yeah.
clearly you admitted that you're a middling copywriter, and you can now turn your output
Yeah.
up towards where the top 10% are.
Yes.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
beyond that, your old process of writing some copy versus the new process, great, you're
Yeah.
getting better copy. What's that done in terms of time that it would take you?
Oh, well, that's one of those questions that uh, is difficult, absolutely, to say. But I mean, it's obviously less. But the end of the day is that it I wouldn't mind if that was more, because if I'm getting a better output and giving my clients a better chance of success with their various offers, then it doesn't really matter because ultimately, broadly speaking, my prices are more or less in line. I could probably make the case I can increase the price because of the copy.
Yeah, because
The-
you're
yeah,
pricing the value that you're creating,
yeah,
not the time that it's taking you to create the value.
yeah. I mean, if you think about headlines, I mean, so important to create a headline that captures your attention, that does that first thing that says, "Will I pay attention?" And if you've got a headline that says, "Yeah, I will," actually, that kind of works for me. It might be an investment, or it might be and it might be a new high-end product or whatever. One of my clients will have some that type of service in that area. It might be insurance product, for instance. And you know, the headline is "Will I pay attention?" But the subheadline will be something like, "Will I engage a bit further? Has it? Oh, it's captured my attention, but will I engage further?" Now, what if I could get those two pieces of that collateral, that it might be a sales letter, it might be an email, whatever. What if I could get those two to work so well that the reader will read on? And that's really their purpose, is headline to read the subhead, subhead to read the next, the lead, as it were. So basically, if I can get people to read more of the collateral, to go through the collateral, then there's a decent chance that they will end up being more interested and therefore being more curious, and then doing the thing that you're looking for them to do, which might be download this or have a call or whatever it is. So, but the whole idea of this is that this application was a sort of, I wouldn't say a weak spot, but I would say a weaker spot than it needed to be, and therefore it's a solution. So, I when this came along, I'm thinking, oh, hold on a minute. I as a company providing services to people, I've just got better at what I do.
Absolutely. So that's a very, very specific
Hmm.
use of AI. And I think that's also reflecting where things are going right now, Graham.
Yeah.
That we had this about 18 months ago, ChatGPT came along,
Hmm.
and people were really amazed about what it could do.
Hmm.
And we discovered that the thing about ChatGPT was it was all about how you prompted it and how you got it to give you an answer. It was all about learning how to talk to it.
Mm.
We're moving that stage further now, that rather than just talking direct to the large language model, you're building an application that is using the large language model in a very specific way and giving it other things rather than ChatGPT trained on pretty much the whole of the internet.
Mm.
Benson, you're training it very much on specific marketing materials that are known to be best of breed and really
Yeah,
do work.
it's a bit like, if you think about school and the level of general education in school, and let's just say your school was, and I've never used this analogy before, but it seems to fit. If you looked at your school, and let's say your school, you had a few people who were like super clever, really brilliant, and then the rest, that it was the normal pyramid, sort of 1%, 5%, 15%. You would have been in the top 5%, Kevin. I get that, but basically, for the rest of the school, they'd have been, they wouldn't have been that bright, and then all the rest of that, they're struggling a bit, and that would have been me down at the bottom there. I mean, I'd have been struggling back
There's
of
the
the.
man who's got himself an MBA.
Well, yeah, I mean that came later, but I wasn't in school then. But no, seriously, that is a reasonable. Would you take, if you asked everybody to do an essay, you'd probably get, out of say 100 essays, you might get five or six that are absolutely brilliant, really so readable, getting the message across really well. Most of them would be absolute rank, wouldn't they? I mean, they wouldn't, they just wouldn't. I don't know, they wouldn't just do it.
Hmm.
And I think, in a sense, if the chat is trained right across the internet for its answers, it's trained in a particular way. So you find, when you're asking it to write things for you, it's using the same base model, but it's training itself, or it's grabbing its answers right across this the internet, and all the different websites on there, which all have different levels of, shall we say, strength. So the issue then becomes, how good is the output from chat? Now, to the where it gets better is the latest versions of chat can actually deliver a much better result than chat, say 3.5. So 4 is better than 3.5. But 4 compared to Benson is like the sort of the table up from the dumbest table in the school, rather than the guy right at the top. It's a long way off, because basically it just doesn't have the ability to write in that fashion. You literally have to see it, and I can actually produce something and put it into the show notes just to give you a sense of how
Yeah.
it looks. But I I think for me, it is a specific, but if you think about marketing, a lot of marketing is to do with the use of words.
It is, yeah. And I suppose where I started using AI was before ChatGPT came along, before it was released publicly. I discovered something called, it was originally called Jarvis, and then had to, for legal reasons, be renamed Jasper.
That's,
And Jasper was a way of, prompting the large language model to write. It was particularly designed for marketing people to write blog posts and so forth.
hmm
And it was actually pretty good at it.
hmm
Uh, I stopped using it not long after ChatGPT came along because I realized I was paying a monthly amount for Jasper and it wasn't actually giving me anything for what I wanted to use it for any better than I could get for free out of 3.5, or if I wanted to pay something extra for, I could get a lot better an answer. But I discovered a couple of other tools, actually, Graham, that I've ended up using quite a lot. First tool is something called Poe,
Okay.
Poe.
Okay.
And you can get Poe as an app on your iPhone, on your iPad. I've got the app version on my MacBook as well.
Mm.
And what Poe is doing is it isn't just talking to ChatGPT. It can talk to Claude. It can talk to Llama. It can talk to some of the image generating models as well. And it has a series of what it calls bots, where you've got to go into ChatGPT and you'd start from scratch and saying, assume you are an expert in, say, marketing,
hmm
and you need to write an article on or a good blog post on the following with a great headline. You'd have to start that prompt all the way from scratch. What Poe does is give you a whole series of bots that are effectively pre-prompted to do loads of these things. And I found that incredible. Okay, this
Mm.
is the standard one it calls Assistant, which is pretty much ChatGPT, and you can
Mm.
use research questions in. There's one that's trained to be a medical expert,
Mm.
which I found rather useful following a medical appointment with the doctor. I
Mm.
find it a lot more successful than going in and searching the internet and looking at medical sites and trying to find things.
Mm.
Just asking, it assumes a medical expert. What would you do in these circumstances?
Mhm.
Um, but the one that I really like and use all the time, there's a bot on there to write a LinkedIn post.
I'd heard, I don't know whether this is true, is that, and you can understand why Google might do this, but basically Google kind of downplayed those blog posts that have been written in chat, and partly it, because they're not necessarily offering anything
Ah,
new as such.
yeah, they're not necessarily offering anything new, but take my use of the LinkedIn one, Graham.
Mm.
I could go and say to that particular bot, go write me a LinkedIn post on X mentioning these 3 points.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
need,
Well, it,
and it
I,
would produce the sort of
yeah,
generic answer that you want. But no, that's
yeah,
not how I'd necessarily use it.
yeah.
I'd go perhaps write the LinkedIn post myself, then give it the whole post
Mm.
effectively as the prompt, and it just goes, rewrites it.
That's a really
Changes
interesting.
the language completely into something that's much more succinctly written, has got a decent headline about it, and you know,
I, I
we
think for
we've
me,
got,
that's a good idea because I think um, I can relate to the fact that if it's got a bit of you in it, if you started it and it improves effectively your language in a sense, or adds to it, makes it more I don't know, deeper. You've added another 100% to each bullet or whatever it is. Then all of a sudden you've got more clarity. And I think that is really, and if it can actually write in a particular way that's less salesy, for instance, or whatever, then you've got a chance of communicating something in a fair way that people might want to read.
yeah,
But if we as a nation become um, uh, a bit a bit sort of, hold on a minute, a bit resistant to read something that doesn't obviously come from Kevin Appleby,
Mm.
then you're going to have a real struggle going forward with blogs, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah. And I've used this particular bot within Poe in a couple of very specific ways.
Mm,
I write a LinkedIn newsletter now once a week. Yeah,
mm,
I'll take time and actually write that myself.
mhm.
Now, if I then take the entire text of my LinkedIn newsletter, LinkedIn wants you to put a summary post out that sort of appears in everybody's feed and encourages them to click this article that's going to be a 5-minute read. Well, if I post the entire text of the newsletter as the prompt into Poe, it'll give me a fantastic summary
Yeah.
of the whole article.
Which is, I think, an effective use
It's a
of a
really,
language
really
model. Yeah.
effective use. And it's how much time am I saving?
Mm.
Well, saving a bit because I'm not sitting down writing that particular post from scratch.
Well,
But it's all about the how effective is this? Get people to click and read the content.
well, you can measure that over time. But
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to bring up, without getting off Benson too quickly, is that it has something called Cloner. Now, if I asked you who's my favorite American marketing guru,
Oh, Graham, I don't know. You've mentioned so many of them.
yeah, but you've
Probably
probably
Dan Kennedy, would
it
it?
might be Dan Kennedy. Okay, well, Kennedy writes lots of emails, and with Luke's, this is my eldest son. Luke has started a business called Selected Cyber, and eventually he'll come onto the podcast and explain more about cyber security because I don't think we've ever had an expert talking to us about that. So anyway, the thing is, Luke's started this business, a lot of information, but he's obviously young, and so therefore, I thought, well, I'll help him a little bit with the type of things that he can write. Now, just for grins, shall we say, we basically took a Dan Kennedy letter or an email that he actually sent to me, and we put it in Cloner. Now you can guess where this is going, and then we used Luke's blueprint in Benson, so with all Luke's stuff in it, and instead of it talking about, I don't know, a conference that was coming up that Dan was promoting or whatever it was that was in that email, it changed it to Luke's cyber security business. And you, but it had the same. I want to say structure rather than words. It has a unique index underneath the cloner, so it kind of, you know, you're not plagiarizing. You're actually you're, if you like, you're taking the essence of the structure of the email, which
Structure and
is,
style rather than the words.
yes, and so therefore you've got, but it's Luke's words, and it's Luke's sort of pains, and the errors that people are making with cybersecurity that were being brought out with the same Kennedy, 1-2 punch sort of thing. And I
Yeah.
think that,
Kennedy's style, Kennedy's way of doing things, Kennedy's emotions, but Luke's.
yet it's well, some of the emotions come from the blueprint, but yeah, yes, you're absolutely right. So if the cloner again, and if you don't particularly like it too much, it was too strongly, worded in one particular way, you can make it a little bit. Let's just say you were selling, and one of our recent guests was L. Wilson, who, up to a point, is a gentle soul, but a very, very intelligent person. And let's just say that her style was aimed at just women, and she was talking to them about something that was to do with their emotions. The last thing you want, particularly, is a Dan Kennedy hard-hitting email. So but you can base it on Kennedy's approach, but then you could sort of down dial it to make it more, for want of a better word, woo woo. You effectively make it a little bit more, I'm going to say feminine, but a little bit more aimed at that person who's more bothered about the soul rather than the pocket. And I think that is really, it's just amazing that it can be done in that way. And that's what you're getting in that kind of realm of my of my business right now in terms of copy. So I just thought I'd throw that one out there, but it's very similar in some ways to what you were sort of describing with Poe and the sort of creation of this LinkedIn thing. But it's a slightly different spin. It's taking somebody else's brilliance. And you've talked about Daniel Priestley. Imagine if Priestley had written some sort of, I don't know, post of some sort, stick that into Cloner with Kevin Appleby's blueprint. So it's no longer about whatever Priestley was talking about. It's got the same essence, the same communication style, shall we say. And it comes out at the end. Now, you might still want to sort of edit it a little bit, here and there, and that's perfectly normal. But that's what you're going to get. Now, this is just an example of something that I'm aware of within this AI realm in my area of the world. And I dare say some of our listeners have come across like hundreds of others as they're getting developed in other market areas. And I know just by doing a quick search on chat that there are literally hundreds. But I've got something else to share with you as well, Kevin. Actually,
Okay.
about Grow CFO, because what I did is I went to now I haven't done a blueprint, so it's not really Benson related. But when we talked to Elle Wilson, she mentioned MECLAB's guild. Now, it effectively there's a I followed Flint McLaughlin, who is the head of MECLABs, for I don't know 15 years, something like that. And it was way before I started my business. But the thing about Flint is he's a great communicator. He's a philosopher. And this is his book, which he kindly signed for me, which is The Marketer as Philosopher. So if you can see that there, I don't know if you can see that.
Yep, can you get that now?
And it's basically some of his thoughts about marketing. And he creates marketing into a sort of it would call it a heuristic, but basically he's modeled the way in which he believes marketing can be optimized. His study is all about why do people say yes. So he's worked on that as an idea. But that MECLABs have done the same as Benson in a way. It's not quite the same, but what they've done is they've created, based on Flint's something like, well, more than 10 years worth, but 10,000 experiments. And when you say an experiment, it's a marketing experiment. So basically, what they've done there is they have tested one sort of hypothesis against another, and again, they're trying to understand what makes more yeses. So in other words, people get a better response from their
But
market.
lots and lots and lots of things that we generally call A/B testing.
Yeah, that's definitely it. And so it's a bit like, well, if you come up with a headline, is it the best headline you could come up with? Is there a different headline, or is there a different structure to a landing page, or is there a different offer you could make, etc. That kind of thing. And sometimes really small tweaks, you can get an amazing lift in response. Anyway, so taking all those sorts of things, he's created, and it's not really surprising given Flint's sort of academic sort of thing, and if you do any research into him, and I'll put a link to him and so forth in the show notes, but he's very much an academic. So, but one of the things in the system itself that he's developing, and the guild members are almost like testing out and helping develop, is that you can actually use like different professors. So it might be a professor of the website development. So in other words, I can put in, and I did put in, the website that you've been responsible for, along with other people, developing, which is the Grow CFO website, which is a very good website, by the way. And so what I did is I popped that into MECLABs, and it effectively, I put my own website in there as well, and it effectively gave us a few ideas about how it might be improved. So what it does is I asked it to say, for instance, this part of right, got this part of it. It said write the most compelling headlines for Grow CFO. So it had a look at your website, and it felt that you could improve your um, your headlines. So um, so it did.
Yeah. Now,
So
I'd
it's
be
generated a number of
surprised
headlines.
if it had said anything different to that, because to be honest, I don't think we've ever gone into A/B testing of different pages like that on the website.
Well, you and 1,000 others, Kevin, and so therefore the way I look at it, and that's why I think I can't possibly retire at this moment
Hmm.
because I'm involved with some really interesting um, things that can really help people.
Yes.
Because if you've got, I mean, let's face it, if you've got a lousy landing page or a head or web page, um, and you can do something about it relatively quickly, that will give you a better response, more conversion. Why on earth wouldn't you do that?
Yeah. So, Graham, I've got to ask you as part of that, does MechLab's system produce a report, or is it all on screen for you?
To be honest with you, it's on screen, but you just grab it and I don't
I'd
understand.
love to. I'd love to read that and see what it actually says.
Oh,
It
I can send it to you. I mean, for my normal fee.
cool.
Yeah, but no, seriously, no, I can send it to you, of course. And actually, depending on your willingness, we can put it as a show note, so anybody listening to this can see the type of thing. I don't see why not. At the end of the day, I could put my own business in there, so you get a sense of um, what it does. You could just give me a random website and you just say, "Tell me more about that." Something that you're aware of. But
There's another nice little tool that I've used frequently within Poe.
oh
There's a
yeah,
bots in there that if you give it a URL,
yeah,
it'll very quickly summarize
yeah,
on the page.
yeah, yeah.
So if you found an article about something and you're writing a blog and you cross-referred the article, you
Mhm.
know you'll want that paragraph that say, what's this article all about? Great.
Mhm.
Feed the URL over there, automatically writes that little summary. You
Yeah.
might need to tweak it a bit, but where I am really seeing AI at the moment giving me benefit is in research and cutting down the research time for things.
Mm.
And actually, um, one of the it'll have happened by the time this podcast goes out, but we've been running a seminar in Grow CFO on AI and automation.
Mhm.
I ran a panel session, and one of the gentlemen in the panel session was Randy Wooten. And I recorded a podcast with Randy.
Mm.
He's the CEO of a company called Maxio, and he writes a lot of articles. And Randy is a bright guy, and he goes very deep into a number of subjects. He's got his own particular voice, and he
Mhm.
doesn't want to lose that. And we chatted on the podcast. Randy talking about how when he's going to write an article, and he's not doing them every week, he's really putting a lot of effort into this.
Yeah.
He's employing a ghostwriter,
All right. Okay.
and he'll come up with the idea to start off with and some of the
Mhm.
points he wants to make. And then he say to the ghostwriter, go research that. Ghostwriter will go away, research that, and will come back with a first draft. They'll sit down together
Yeah.
and then go through the draft and they'll improve and whatever. But the final draft isn't written by the ghost, but might be based on what the ghostwriter brought up, but it'll be written by Randy himself.
Mm.
Randy's telling me, well, actually, Kevin, as a result of AI, I've dispensed of the services of the ghostwriter. I don't need him anymore because I can come up with my idea in the first place
Yeah.
and the things that I want to talk about. Instead of getting the ghostwriter to go off and do the research, I've got to brief the ghostwriter. Well, I can brief ChatGPT or whatever it is in exactly the same way. So we're not just talking about, oh, go tell me about whatever. You're giving a reasonably detailed brief.
Yeah.
That comes back with the research. It can even produce a first draft that then you can take and you can do all that final editing and proper writing of copy in a
Yeah.
particular style. So I take what you said earlier, Graham, about Google playing down all of this AI content, it all being particularly average.
Mhm.
But I really do think, as a research assistant, it can save a whole load of time. And in the case of that ghostwriter,
Yeah.
you're going to have to go and find a new gig.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, or they're just going to have to say, well, I'll take on more clients then
Or he's
because
got
they can do it quicker.
he's got to take a step backwards
Mm.
and say, okay, Randy, you were giving me ideas,
Hmm.
and I was going away and researching. Well, I've looked at all the stuff you've written, and I think here's two or three ideas. So, and oh, by the way, I've already gone off and researched them, and here's what I've got.
Mm.
He's the ghostwriter's now got to play a different game.
It's what's scary is um, somewhere between 6 and 7. I think Dawn, shall we say, created our dinner for about, I'm going to say 6:45. And if I'm at my desk, she'll bellow up to saying it's ready, sort of thing. And so that was the sort of end point, and I stretched that by about 5 minutes because I wasn't quite finished. But the start point would have been, I don't know, just before 6, I would imagine. So I was thinking about Luke's business, Selected Cyber. And in that time, I wrote and produced a 44-page book.
Hmm.
Now, the book itself was created into a PDF.
Yes.
It was also created into one of these flip books, the one that sort of turns. I've never quite got used to them, but basically, they're interesting to some people. But it was a book. And I could have taken that to the printers, had it printed physically, and it was a book. And it was about, the actual setup for it, and I'll tell you where it was made in a minute, but basically the design of the first page was, a bit jazzy and so forth, the copy, and I had to come up with a headline, etc. And it was all about targeting one of Luke's avatars, which are chief information security officers. What CISO. And the whole idea, these guys have got it piled on because basically what they are is that they have to somehow get their business to think seriously about stopping the bad guys from ripping them off and creating all kinds of damage to their companies. So thinking about them and their jobs, this thing wrote a book, and I couldn't, but it just kept going, but it covered, creating an incident response plan, responding to security incidents, recovering from a cyber attack, all of it. Now, don't get me wrong, the words in there probably needed a bit of amendment, but Kevin, less than an hour, I'd written a book, 44 pages. I could have had that printed the following day, sent him, 20 copies, and it had my name on it because my account was on the name, was on the with this particular software, but it created the book. And the software in that I'm talking about, for anybody who's still with us, is Designer.
That's
Now,
design with two R's.
with two
That's
R's.
a piece of software that I used years ago, Graham.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a couple of episodes of this podcast where we gave away a book
Mm-hmm.
you could download, which I created in Designer.
Yeah.
But hey, I had to write the text.
Yeah. And
Thanks, the designer has moved on.
oh yeah, I think I bought it some time ago, but I hadn't looked at it for. I literally had not. And don't get me wrong, I didn't have to be an expert. I hadn't looked at that software for I don't know how long, a couple of years or so. But I'd bought their um, lifetime thing or whatever it was. It wasn't a huge amount, but basically, when I went back into design, I realized I had so many credits, and I basically created this book off and I hardly put a dent into the credits. So the point I'm trying to get to is that particular software, and there's a lot more you can invest in that field. But if you imagine you're actually taking a book and you're specifically making it for, in your case, finance officers or for the particular segment of finance officers that you're interested in, or the segment that you might want to do a particular action, which is to take a course or whatever, get certified or whatever it is that you're trying to get them to do. So you don't have to have the same book for the same audience. For the whole of the audience, you have that book for a particular audience, like the CISOs that Luke might be interested in. Now, language in this particular case was quite American, and it had too many long words. So if he had a refiner, I'd be saying, fifth grade, please. But at the end of the day, it it just demonstrated the sheer power
Yeah.
of
Looking at,
and I don't get me wrong, Kevin. I know nothing about what Luke's does in terms of this area.
yeah,
So it wasn't me writing it or tweaking it. It was just, this is the target market. Tell me now. Now write the book.
yeah. Looking at another tool, Graham, that I think is well worth putting into here as well is Grammarly. Right?
Ah, yeah,
Now,
yeah,
I started off using a free version of Grammarly, and literally all it was pretty much a spell checker.
yeah.
And it's great when you're in Word or something like that. There's always been a spell checker built in. You can spot your mistakes. You're writing a blog post on a website. There ain't no spell checker there.
Yeah.
And I was frequently making mistakes, publishing things too quickly, not spotting a spelling mistake. And it was pretty embarrassing when you read it back. You just haven't spent the time to proofread it. And I am actually the world's worst at proofreading because I read what I think's on the page and not what's actually there.
Yeah.
So I got Grammarly, I got the free version, and then I decided to upgrade to the paid version. Now the paid version doesn't just sit on in the browser; it sits on there's a Mac app for Grammarly as well, so it'll go and sit inside Word and things like that. But the paid version doesn't just spot your spelling mistakes; it looks really deeply into the grammar and how things are written. Now, I can write an article and it can be spelt okay, grammatically okay, but Grammarly it'll come along and it'll probably suggest about 15 or 16 changes that it'll make, and it'll really improve the readability of the article. And it's got choices inside it as well. You can go to the settings, you can change it between American English and UK English. You can change it between business language and more personal language and so on. So I'm just thinking, you got that book written in Designer. Wonder what would have happened then if you had Grammarly running on top of that, checking the grammar, checking all the wording. If I'm writing, I talk about writing a newsletter in LinkedIn, and you write that natively into the LinkedIn prompts, or you cut and paste a piece of text you might have written in Word or something, but then the paid version of Grammarly cuts in and starts showing you where you've got to rewrite it, suggesting the changes you should make, simplifying your text, making it far more readable.
I think my dad had a phrase, it cuts the time to the coast. So basically where we are is, you're a bit closer to the coast than us, but basically it's a good 70 or 80 miles either which way. Yeah. So, if we can cut the time to the coast, and that's what I guess AI is doing. And I'm conscious that we've not really touched more than about half a dozen or so AI things that we're using. And we're a couple of 60-year-olds. So the issue is that the guys who are coming through into their early careers now, or they're entrepreneurs and they're, going through the first flush, they will have to be all over this. Because if they're not taking on AI in 2024, there's a reasonable chance that in 2026, they're not going to be here.
The interesting one to watch, Graham, for most people as well, is Microsoft and Copilot. Okay. You can already go and get a hold of Copilot, which works inside Bing. Yeah. And actually, it's a little wheeze that if you don't want to pay for ChatGPT 4, you can get a ChatGPT 4 output from Copilot
Mm.
for pretty much free
Right.
in that version. But if you've got a Microsoft subscription, as most of us will have, and
Mm.
mine's Microsoft Home, um, you can go. It's not including your basics at £99 a year. You've got to pay extra. It's actually £20 a month. But that then opens up uh, Copilot Pro, which is giving you even more sophisticated version of a chat GPT like engine. But there's
Mm.
also Copilot then sits inside Word, inside PowerPoint, and inside Excel. Okay.
It's
And if you
yeah.
remember way back in the day, do you remember the old Microsoft paperclip?
Mm.
It used to be so darned annoying, you turn it off. But the Copilot's effectively sitting there, and all the time you're doing something, it's giving you suggestions. Okay, you can be in the middle of a Word document. You can ask Copilot to go rewrite that paragraph. You can be in PowerPoint and say, I want a new slide that talks about this, this, and this. Copilot will produce the first draft of the slide for you. In
Yeah, I
Excel,
mean,
it is really powerful as well to say, oh, I want another column on the end of that table that
mm.
calculates this. It'll go put the column in with the right formula in place.
Now, I'm conscious that we could go on for a long time talking about AI, but this has been a podcast which is really a summary of where you and I have got to.
Yeah.
And I dare say there are things that we haven't, both of us haven't mentioned. I know certainly I've been using other things, but
But yeah, I mentioned the Copilot one because I've got it.
yeah,
And I
no, I get that. But what I'm trying to say is that I'm sure that there's a range
Graham.
of other things that we
Yeah.
could talk about, but time's against us, Kevin. So, what we have to do is say, look, if you want to find out more about some of the things that we're talking about and what, we're living, shall we say, then you'll find links to some of these things on our show notes page. And therefore, you know, go right now to the next100days.org website, and then you'll find the link to the show notes page, and then some of the links from here to some of this stuff that we've been talking about.
But just in conclusion, Graham, I've always been worried that there's one day that I'll wake up and technology will no longer make sense.
Mm.
That could very easily have been the dawn of AI. But I think both you and I have kind of, rather than say, oh, okay, that's for the next generation, I think we've both actually embraced it.
Oh, I definitely, yeah, definitely. I think if anything, as I said earlier, that it'll delay retirement for me because I can see the huge opportunity. I haven't even mentioned some of the things that in particular MechLabs will do. But at the end of the day, I want to be at the forefront of that particular development because I completely believe in the underpinnings of it. So, well, on that bombshell, we will have to draw today's podcast to a close. Again, it's been an absolute pleasure having Kevin Appleby on the show.
The real Kevin Appleby.
Not the AI version. And well, your background's AI now, isn't it? Whereas mine isn't. What can I say? This is an
I've got
office.
the real background today. It's just blurred a little bit.
Well, I know, I realise that. It's what's happening to my LinkedIn posts. Apparently, they're all blurry. I don't know why that's happening, but somebody at LinkedIn and Apple are having a go at it. So we'll see. Anyway, so on that irrelevance, I have been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.